Well, hello there, students. Today we're studying up on Strixhaven, a Curriculum of Chaos, and we're going to be curating through these pages of the new book and check out the purple cover. I mean, how can you not love the purple cover of Strixhaven? But we're going to be breaking this thing down and seeing what kind of things we can plagiarize, and by plagiarize, I mean take inspiration from and homebrew our own games, whether you run this adventure or not, because in general, when this book first was announced, and even when it came out, and even when I arrived, I really wasn't that excited. Strixhaven at Magic the Gathering. I played Magic the Gathering back in the day, but I don't really know about the lore of it, and it's an adventure module, and I run my own homebrew world, so what does it matter to me? And more importantly, what does it matter to you guys, which is always the questions to start thinking whenever I get these books early. So I wanted to break this thing down and see what things we can take from it, what cool things that I learned from it, and a top 10 overview of what things we can put into our game. And at the end, I'm going to give you my overall rating of what I think about this book. And no, it's not a 10, but you can decide if you want to pick this up for yourself. And down in the description, there's an affiliate link that I'd appreciate if you use if you are going to buy the book, because it really does help support what I do here, kind of like joining Patreon, because until the end of this year, this holiday season, I'm doing a special offer where if you join right now, you get every single volume of the DC Playbook, volumes 1 through 4. That's 4 volumes for the price of 1 for joining as an appreciation. Thank you for support and the holiday season. But if you're watching this in the future, don't worry, you can always pick up any sort of PDF you want over my website. But speaking of extra reading material, let's go ahead and dive on into Strixhaven here, because right when I first started this thing, like I said, I wasn't that excited for this book. I would say my excitement rating would be a 1. Honestly, I had no idea what Strixhaven was at all, but that's what I'm here to help you guys out with. So Chapter 1 is the overview of Strixhaven. Strixhaven is a college of magic. Think Hogwarts and from Harry Potter. This is literally a huge school of magic with 5 different schools, each standing for something different. It really does a great job of giving you an orientation of the University of Strixhaven, the general campus overview, how it kind of works, the faculty, staff type things of just how it works. And then it goes into the 5 different colleges. My favorite section was principles and polarities, and it talks about how each of the 5 schools have polar opposite beliefs that they study in. For example, Lorehold College has an order and chaos polarity, which really is interesting and makes sense, because if you wanted to dive into and understand chaos, you would also have to understand order. Students in these schools that believe in a certain way, they also understand the opposite side of the spectrum. There's some real life implications there. If you truly want to dive into and learn something, you should learn the opposite things as well, or opposing viewpoints as well, so you're fully enlightened. Who knew you were going to get a real life tip out of this one as well? But then chapter 2 is creating an actual student in Strixhaven. There's the Owlin race. We'll get into some of the other stuff of all these top 10 homebrews I got here for you too. But the most interesting part for how this chapter thing laid out is in chapter 3 is your first year of university. I thought that was really interesting. That entire chapter is that year at the school, your freshman year at the university. And then in chapter 4, it's your second year, and chapter 5 is your third year, chapter 6 is that final year, and then graduation of this college. So this entire thing takes you from 1 through 10 of this adventure. But there's also interesting things they do in here that you could run this not as a full-blown campaign and just as a little one-off adventure. And then chapter 7, of course, are the NPC stat blocks of the monsters and even faculty and student members inside the school. All right, let's get into this top 10 list of things we're going to plagiarize, homebrew from this book. So number 1 is lore boosters. This book really did give me inspiration in the way that they organize these 5 schools. There's also themes for campaigns. In general, whenever I make my campaigns, there's certain themes that I want to hit at different points of the campaign, or have be an overarching thing that they feel. I personally like to take themes and lore like this and weave it into all different parts of my campaign. I had 5 dragons one time where there was 1 neutral, 2 evil, 2 good. Of the good dragons, there was a lawful and a chaotic. Of the evil, there was a lawful and a chaotic. And it brought this balance and theme to help me kind of piece together my world. So whenever something happened in the world and I wanted to react to what the players did, I could think of which dragon would make sense to act on that. And in the same way here, whenever you have this 5 well-established colleges, each with their own mascot, their own themes, their own things they study, their own schools of magic type stuff. It really helps fill in any sort of gaps whenever you're thinking about, oh, what school would this pertain to? Oh, it would be this one for sure. So my inspiration from this that I already did some of in my current campaign, I'm running over my second channel, link down in the description for that. I have a bunch of different nations that are at war with each other. And the way that they flushed out these colleges, there's a lot of different things. I was like, I could mirroredly flush out my nations in the same way. But overall, I thought it was very well done how they took the themes and lore and weave them into the entire structure of this university. Number 2 now is world-specific punishments. And for this book specifically, it's a university. And there's an actual section in the book, as I'm reading through here, where I realized this, because it literally says, give student-like punishments. So give your players detention, kick them out of class, give them a bad grade, other types of things, which I just thought was a really interesting punishment for a Dungeons and Dragons game. It was very outside the box of what you normally would encounter thinking of punishments and things to throw at your players. What if one of your players is going to get expelled from the university? And I don't know if this is because I'm just a teacher in real life and I started reading this and I was like, wait a second, this hits home for me. And I already started to kind of increase my interest in this book just a little bit because it's different. There's so many adventures and into Feywilds and planes of existence and dragons and stuff, but this is just a whole different level of danger. But the thing that inspired me to do and self-reflect on my own campaign is what is so specific about the theme of my campaign, the overarching plot of my campaign. What would be really bad specific punishments that would be bad in this campaign, but maybe not in another? Currently, I have some themes of disease spreading across the land, and the disease also lycanthropy, but maybe it's a little too close to home right now. But what kind of punishments would there be around that theme of my world? Maybe there's a cure for in some way that's in danger and the players have to choose between saving someone or saving the cure. Or of course, inflict that disease onto a player, which I already did to 3 of them, so don't worry about that. Also, a bonus thought here is when you create characters in this, you don't actually have to pick only magic users. That'd be very limiting to only be able to choose people with magic. You could pick a fighter or even a barbarian, and part of the feats from whenever you create a character in here lets you learn some sort of spell. So this also started piquing my interest in this book of thinking about certain mundane type classes, martial type classes, that just with a little pinch of magic, what they could do in this college. Number 3 here is a props to this book is this is not just a single adventure that you must run in this campaign. You can put this college of Strixhaven, you can change the name of it. You could run a Harry Potter themed campaign in this thing and just place it into your world and have it work exactly like Harry Potter. But this was a really cool thought to have because in my last campaign of 3 years, this college would have been a perfect place to put in the main city. And just having this book would let you have access to a college. And maybe it's not the main focus of your campaign at all. Maybe there is a place where, you know, if I asked you right now, Dungeon Masters, where would be the biggest college in your world? You might be able to think about where to put that thing. And this book would be in that place. Would the players ever go there? Who knows? But if they do, you have an entire adventure waiting for them. And this book is also structured in a way where you can run each of these chapters for each of these years at the school. They have a little starting thing we'll talk about in a second where you can actually pick up right in the middle of it, run it like a short adventure, and then they could go right back on and doing what they were doing. Get a little taste of school and then leave. And another thing really cool is apparently the founders of this university, the founders of the 5 schools, were 5 dragons that are also stat blocks in the back of this book, which I thought was really interesting that a dragons founded this university, which makes me also start to think of what types of things could dragons be founders of that you might not expect them to be founders of. A dragon bakery? Comment down below, let me know what kind of dragon founder you want to do in your world now. Number 4, we talked about a second ago, but it's this mirrored categories of factions and how they did it in this book. It was really interesting because we're all still in chapter 1. By the way, at this point, they go over each of the 5 schools and they have 4 different categories that they make sure to hit generically for each one of these in this chapter. And then later on, it goes into very specifically, if you want to make a student from this school, they have these general tendencies. And it was really cool that I'll get to that in a second. So the first thing they go into here is studies and philosophy. These are these polarizing concepts. And if I was going to be a player wanting to know about the big picture of this college and like what each of these universities stand for, that's a big part of the lore that I'd want to know in general, much less choosing which kind of character I'd want to make. And even that thought right there, I don't know which school I'd pick, which one I'd make a character for. Then they did something really cool here that this is something I'm totally going to be stealing. And I thought it was very helpful, and things like this are missing sometimes in these books of the truly next level helpful resources. There are scholars for each of the 5 schools, and they've generically labeled them as scholars because you could use these generic scholars for students, for instructors, for full-blown professors, for the prince, like the entire, any type of NPC you meet in this school can meet like this. Boom, there it is, a D10 table of just very, very simple things. Chronological history and truth for prosperity. Its principle is order. Like all through here. Now, I would probably have a little bit more for each one that I would want as a dungeon master to fully flush it out. And I do that for all my NPC tables, but that's a whole separate video. I just thought it was a really great idea to have a table that could be used for any sort of member from this school, which is what I do. When you walk into a town, I have a list of anything for NPCs of any shops you run into, and you can pick and choose them there. Then they also put specific faculty and specific campus things for each of these schools. Faculty members that aren't just generic and they're very important probably to the story or the adventure, and specific campus location things that maybe this college has and this one doesn't. Timeout. We're getting into chapter 2 now, which brings us to the Owlin race. And I thought it was very normal race, but in general, people asked me what my opinion was about this, and I used my point by feet system, link down in the description, to custom build all these things. So I've already built an Owlkin. If one of my players wanted to build an Owlin race, I have a point by feet system where they can just choose the features that are owly to them and they'd make one. So in general, I don't normally get excited about these types of races, but I am going to be overhauling this point by feet system and adding in a way for players to fly, because flying players are terrible and I hate them, but if I were to have an Owlin race, just like an Aarakocra or other things, I get this question all the time on my live streams, I would say, yes, you can totally be that. But if we're starting at level 1, explain to me why your wings are broken. And then as the player levels up over time, they get the ability to start to be able to fly. They recover their wings get mended. What a cool story arc for this character, have to overcome some sort of thing that they can't just automatically do yet. By the time they hit level 5, they can fly minimally, and then once they hit like level 10 or something, okay, cool, your wings are fully healed. But if you want a whole video on PC flying and how I handle it, and a lot of different homebrew creations of ways you can handle it, leave a comment, let me know. Like button, all that good stuff. Okay, number 5 is choosing a college. I think this would be a really cool moment in a session 0 to think about which college you want to be in. And I'd almost have my players choose that just in their own heads for a second, and then they could talk about it and see if they wanted to go to the same college, or it might be a surprise, and I'd make them, again, whatever you feel like would be best for you. You could make them choose what kind of college secretly beforehand, and then have everybody announce what college that they're going to be at, and then from that point, you can start to think about the different connections between the characters. What if they all chose to be in the same college? That'd be really interesting. But there's a whole little blurb here, and I think that this should be in every single adventure module, is if you're going to run this as an adventure, the session 0, how does your party start? How do they get together? They have a whole section in here to help kind of get that cohesive group going before the session starts, which is in a lot of ways a really good way to do it. So it's not this like, it's already high school, it already has a school vibe and could be awkward and stuff anyway, but did you get introduced through friends? Or the NPC that you're mutual friends with, that you get introduced to? Were you already in the same college? Were you in the same class together? What class were you in together? Or did all of you get sent to detention at the same time for doing something sketchy? And then accidentally find power crystals hidden deep under a cave and become, wait, that's Power Rangers. I just thought it was really cool how the vibe of this book and the themes and everything make all these different parts feel very different. Punishing players with detentions feels different. Session 0, choosing a college, that feels different and cool. And I started to really like this book more and more as I'm reading it. Number 6 are backgrounds. And in general, I don't like backgrounds. At my table, I don't really even use backgrounds. They have a backstory, and I give them 2 proficiencies that make sense for their backstory instead of having them pick a background as part of their character creation process. And then once they pick the background, they have these specific skills to choose from, and you get this equipment. And I do it a different way. I could probably make a whole video on that. I have one that's really, really old on the channel, but I thought this background thing that ties it into the adventure and gives a adventure of Strixhaven, and then they give backgrounds for each of the different schools, and they have a fully flushed out thing to be from a school. What does it mean to be from a different school? So if you want to be a Prismari student background, they have a feature that's just for them, spells, list of spells that they're going to have access to because they're from that college. And then they have personality traits, little trinkets that they can carry around. These are super simple little things, but it just gives each of these colleges more of a distinct flavor to them. So to combine this method with what I do at my table, if I was to run this game, I would have them tell me their backstory, and they of course would pick a college and everything, and they would get these feats for free. These are just background features or whatever, which is technically a feat, they would just get this for free based on whatever college they came from. Because when I said earlier I don't do backgrounds, one of the missing pieces of that is backgrounds have this feature, which is this cool thing that gives you a little bit of a flavor thing of what you're able to do because of this background. In general, I just homebrew make that up based on what their backstory is. Once they tell me their backstory and they have this whole thing, whether it's this college, maybe I give them something cool where they have a history of going to detentions and they always get in trouble. So then maybe I give them a way to get out of detention or something, and they know some back ways around the school. So how I'd run this at my tables, they would of course choose their college of where they came from and whichever school speaks to them, and they'd have their own background. I wouldn't want them to be so stuck on my entire definition of my character is I'm from this school. Like, okay, but what were you like before then? Do you get in trouble a lot? Are you a bookworm? Like, what kind of things? And then based on that, I would give them some sort of feature, some sort of cool thing where they get advantage on history check rolls specifically about a certain thing, because you don't want it to be too broad or anything like that. Because when I said earlier that I don't use backgrounds, one of the parts of backgrounds is a little feature, a little mini thing that helps in very specific types of things. So make sure you can use other features existing in other books and stuff, or this book, and then take it and run with it and think of what cool things you could give your player based on their backstory. Number 7 is magic items. There are some magic items in this book, and there's a endless cup of coffee, which is just next to the billowing cloak. That's another awesome magic item that has no true purpose, but is amazing at the same time. So the cool thing about these magic items that the takeaway, the homebrew takeaway from this is the themes and how they're connected to the colleges, and certain magic items have these themed loops around these colleges. And why it speaks to me, as I just did this in my homebrew campaign, is each of these nations have a certain theme, and I have this whole big table with these different categories in each nation and what they stood for. Each nation is known for a certain type of magic. The Grasslands nation of Shagra is known for their sound magic. That's really interesting. So whenever they ran across some people from that nation and they beat them in battle and they loot them and stuff, they're going to have some sort of sound things, maybe a booming blade, a literal booming blade, some sort of ear listening type devices for crystals you can put in your ear, almost like an earpiece that you can listen in from far distances. So once you have this theme, you can easily make magic items around a theme of sound. And I spouted off like 8 different magic items in no time at all, just wrapped around the theme of your world. And the magic items can help to build out the lore of your world. So whenever they find a magic item and it has a certain property, like, oh, this must be from this nation, but that means they're here. Just like in this school, if you find certain magic items from different schools and colleges, they could mean something. Timeout. My biggest disappointment in this book, A School of Magic Stuff, is there's only 5 spells. They said, oh, there's new spells and stuff. There's only 5. Now, granted, some of them are really cool, and I always love adding in extra stuff like that. I don't know, I was just expecting something like a high, medium, and low spell level from each of the 5 schools. That might have been a cool thing to do here for the school, then I don't know. But if you want to spice up your spells, specifically cantrips for your game, I have a spell tome brew that I just updated and overhauled, put up on my website today. And as a reward for all my Young Dragon and Up patrons, anytime I release a new PDF like this, I'm going to give it to all those patrons for free. Because man, I'm trying to go full time at this thing before the next school year. Huh? Get it? You see how all comes together? And the support from all my patrons is the only way that's going to be possible. So thank you. Number 8 for this book really speaks to me because I don't run modules. I plan on running a module soon just so that I have, because I generally just always homebrew my worlds, but I want to try out a module. I don't know. We'll see which one I end up doing. But it was really cool that they have at the beginning of each chapter, at the beginning of each of these little mini adventures, they have something that says, hey, if you want to run this as like a one-off and not in the big picture of a campaign, then do this change and this change and that change. I think that's amazing. So like I was saying earlier, if you want to put a college into your world, a university in the middle somewhere, you have technically 4 different adventures and 4 different chapters that would be decently long, multiple sessions long, that you could easily cut things out of, and they give you the instructions to do so and just plop it right into your world. And they give you the recommended starting levels for each chapter. So chapter 3 is 1st level, chapter 4 is 4th level, chapter 5 is 6th level, and chapter 6 is 8th level, which would usually end you at 10th. Number 9 and 10 here are my favorite 2 mechanics of this whole thing. And it really speaks to me from all the Alcanar's Almanac stuff that I've been doing, because I have some social role play type stuff for that, entire chapters designated to it. So when I got to this, I was like, oh my gosh, Wizards of the Coast and I are syncing up again, because it was really cool. Here's what I'm talking about. Extracurriculars and jobs. aka downtime. While playing through Strixhaven, you can choose 2 extracurricular activities or 1 extracurricular activity and a job. There's a whole list of extracurricular activities, and of course you could add more of your own, but whenever you choose an extracurricular activity, as all the other players would too, because you'd have some sort of phase of downtime. I assumed it's weaved in throughout the adventure, but you get a student die. What is a student die? It's a really interesting mechanic. You gain a D4 that you can add to any D20 rolls specifically having to do with that extracurricular activity. Let's say you choose the Dragon Guard Historical Society. The skills pertaining to that extracurricular activity are Arcana and History. So when you choose that extracurricular activity, you get a D4 that you can use on any checks pertaining towards that. And as soon as you use it up, it's gone until a long rest. What a cool mechanic to add little D4s on top of something. I love D4 mechanics where you're given little D4s to be able to spend, because D4s is the smallest little increment of dice. It's a small change, but it feels cool to be able to reward players for the choices that they make. And for doing this extracurricular activity, you get a relationship point that you can spend to build relationships with other NPCs around you. I'll get into those in just a second, because that's number 10. But if you choose a job, you also get a wage, and you get 5 gold at the beginning of every week, and a relationship point. So you can choose if you want to have more the student die, or do you want gold? And it's a really unique choice for downtime that almost makes it feel like a little bit of a mini game. Tons of different role play opportunities, and like I said before, this whole theme of Strixhaven feels different than other adventures. Whenever, even downtime, you're studying and you're going to different extracurricular classes or trying to have a job and manage all that stuff together. So number 10 is that relationship system. I have my own relationship system that I could do a whole nother video on, and working on it with all the Alcanar's Almanac stuff. But it's honestly, this one is pretty awesome, and in some ways similar. Each one, I think the scale is a little low. So here's what I mean. Every NPC has a scale that you can spend or lose relationship points on. Every NPC starts at 0. Whenever you get a relationship point, whether you earned it from doing the extracurricular activities or tons of other things, or another reward for Dungeon Masters to give out towards people, or take away from if you have bad interactions, a negative interaction with an NPC. So each NPC starts at 0. If you get to +2, you become friendly. Awesome. And if you get to -2, you become a rival. And the cool thing here is each of these NPCs, I'm going to show you, have a boon and a bane if you are friendly or a rival with them. Here's a little sample of the NPCs. Check them out. Let's talk about this person. Cordis Damelawar. Interesting name. They have a whole thing about this NPC, what they're all about. They're from the Quandric School. Cool. They have some extracurriculars. They don't have a job, but they have a bond and boon where if you become friends with them, the esteem of Cordis in live action roleplay circles extends to you. Guild members will share any information they know about witch aberrations, monstrosities, and oozes. Yeah, no, I read that right. I went back up and read this. He is a passionate member of the live action role-playing guild. He loves playing out all sorts of fantastical adventures. Wow, what an interesting random NPC for me to pick from this book. There's your boon. The bane, though, is if you don't like this, if this guy doesn't like you, you are a pariah in the campus role-playing scene. The worst monsters are named after you. So there's an example of a bane. You have ugly monsters named after you. But that honestly sounds fun. I would love for this LARPing NPC to become a rival with one of my players. Oh, I would play that up so much. So overall, this system compared to the one that I have, it's a little quick. I feel like 2 points, a +2 or -2. You're a rival, you're a friend. It's a little, it's a little short. You could always, of course, how hard it is to get points, but let's say you're neutral with somebody. You get 1 point. Oh, cool, yeah, and then you become friends with them. So it's really quick. But as a Dungeon Master, keep that in mind, and you should set the scale for how many points that feel right as well. And you can have what happens at +4, what happens at -4. Add even more of this to where it actually maybe becomes something that becomes like an actual problem and not just something bad named after you. So Strixhaven, a curriculum of chaos. The cover alone is a 10, but you know what I'm saying. But the book, my overall rating, I would say for this, with everything in I was gonna say roller coaster, but it was more so like an increasing grow of interest over time. So my rating would be a 7. I think it's a solid score. I was totally thinking I was going to get my first below 7 on this thing, but I'm just interested and excited to run something like this. I think it's so different, right? I think it could have some more magic stuff. I have not dove into, again, this whole thing is no spoilers. I have not dived? Is that a word? I need to go to school more. I'm a math teacher. It's okay. But I think it's really interesting. It's exciting to have all the different spots. You probably saw in my face in this video, thinking about different things about where would my players' colleges go from, making NPCs from different type of college. I think it's punishing them with weird effects. Magic items being granted, and where maybe you get the highest score on the test gets a magic item, and the lowest score, my head starts to run, especially being a teacher myself, with all the different possibilities here. So I give it a 7. I think I would put this in the roster of things to throw to my players. After I'm done with my big homebrew campaign, I'm running on my second channel. Once that wraps up, the next thing I want to run an adventure. I'm going to get my players together. I'm going to pitch them probably Curse of Strahd, Wild Beyond the Witchlight, Strixhaven, maybe Icewind Dale, I don't know. And I'll say, which one do you guys want? And Waterdeep Dragon Heist. I've also heard some good things about that. But this makes it in that roster something that I would be interested in running. So if you're interested in picking up Strixhaven for yourself, links down in the description. There's an affiliate link. I do get a small kickback from you purchasing the book, so I appreciate that. Let me know if you like these videos by hitting that like button so I keep doing these, because I do get the books early and I want to show you guys some homebrew perspective of stuff, of maybe things you can use whether you pick up the book or not. So until next time, stay creative and think outside the box. Peace.